to invite Mythreyi to now turn her camera and mic on and to chat with you about her HDR internship experience. And I'm just going to, Mythreyi, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Susan.
Great. No worries. I'm just going to mute and stop my video. So all over to you.
No worries. Thank you. So hi, everyone. So Susan gave me a really nice introduction at the start. My name is Mythreyi Velmurugan, and I'm currently a PhD student in the Faculty of Science. And I'm working on a number of projects that are kind of adjacent to AI ethics and how do we understand how AI works and how well we can understand how AI works. So as Susan mentioned, I did quite a few sort of things last year around industry engagement, like the 3-minute thesis and the internship. So last year, I would have been in about my third year in, my third year in. So I was a year after my confirmation, and I still had about a year before my final seminar. And I was thinking, okay, this sort of time period might be a really good point in time to start an internship. Get a little bit of an idea of how industry works, make some decisions on whether I want to go into industry, try to stay in academia, whether I want to stay in research at all, those sorts of things. So that was one of the reasons why I kind of went out and did a lot of these activities, was because that was when I was really starting to think about why did I get into research and where do I want to go from here. And I was hoping some of these industry engagement opportunities would really help me out. I also started going out more regularly to Center of Data Science networking events, which were really fantastic because I got a chance to meet a lot of people in industry, hear about how they work and what's kind of involved there. And by industry here, I mean, people who worked in hospitals and data science, people who worked in government, people who worked in various sort of sectors and organizations. So that was a really good experience for me. And when I actually first started looking for internships, it was a bit tough because most of the internships I found tended to be engineering based, whereas I was based more in, I guess, the IT software side of it is where my experience is. So I actually started off trying to self-source an internship because at the time I started looking, I couldn't find anything that would fit my skill set and my experience and my interests. And that had mixed results. So I met someone at a networking event who seemed really keen to have a data science intern, and we got to chatting, and this was someone from a government organization. We had a couple of meetings with them, with someone else at QUT affiliated with them. And at one point they said, look, we might need to, we have our budget meeting this week. I can let you know after that if, we have room for you on this particular project that we might have going. And unfortunately, they didn't get back to me, so I'm assuming it didn't go quite so well. I also interviewed with a startup who was recommended to me by someone in my network saying they were looking for interns. Similar sort of situation. We were talking, it seemed really promising, and again, it fell through because of funding reasons. So that was a bit of a disappointment and a bit of a setback, but I had really good support from my supervisory team on helping me find an internship, so I didn't feel too discouraged. As Susan mentioned, I eventually ended up finding an internship through this organization called HDR Intern, which is run by the Australian Mathematical Sciences Institute. I would strongly recommend keeping an eye on their website if you're in the STEM field. They have internships ranging from health, defense, all sorts of sciences, engineering, all sorts of things. So basically the entire spectrum of STEM and health. So I would definitely recommend keeping an eye on their website for anyone in the STEM field. And they were super helpful as well. They had some really interesting projects. And when I started applying, one of their people actually got in touch with me before I went to the internship interview, sat down with me, made sure I was, reasonably okay for a good fit for the internship, and gave me some tips on interviewing as well, actually, which was really nice. And I can see on the chat, someone has actually asked for advice on the internship interview. And what I found was that the different interviews I'd attended actually were very, very different from each other. So the startup, it felt more like a job interview. I came in, they had a couple of people who asked me some questions. I gave them my resume, and they'd already been through the HDR internship sort of process before with someone else. So they understood that side of it pretty well. So it was mostly talking, talking about my skill sets, the projects they had on, and kind of sharing information around that. And it felt very much like a job interview. The one that I had with the government organization, that was a series of about 2 or 3 meetings, and it felt more like a meeting than an interview. We chatted with each other. They explained some of their projects. I explained some of my interests and where they might align. We talked about, where this could potentially go, but it felt more like a meeting than an interview. And the third one, the one I was ultimately successful with, was Lockheed Martin, which is an aerospace company, but they have sort of many different branches to their work. And this particular sort of subsection of the company I was working with was focused on machine learning research, specifically in the area of ground traffic. So when I met with them, that was somewhere in the middle, actually, because we still had that chat about my skills, what I wanted to do, all of that sort of thing. But they also, what I thought was really interesting, was gave me a sort of an elevator pitch of themselves and the company and the project. And they asked me questions about, what did I think about that? So that was really nice. And from what I've heard from other students who've done internships as well, the interview experience does tend to vary. So I can't really give advice that's going to fit every situation, but I think the best way to approach it is to actually know about the company, let them know up front, what you're interested in, why they wanted to, what they're looking for and what you're looking for. So really the best advice I can give is kind of know what you're going into beforehand so that you can best decide what you might want to talk about. The organization, yes, I can see that Susan's just put it in. So HDR Intern was the organization I got the internship through. And the company I worked with, Lockheed Martin, they were a really big company, and I felt really honored to have worked in, such a big and well-known company, even as an intern, because they were just so supportive. That team was so supportive of the work I did. I was working at the same time as another intern who was on a similar project. And the project that I was working on it was not as similar to my PhD as I had hoped, but there were some threads that were earlier on in my PhD around certain types of data sets that I found were really applicable to this particular project, but it was a little bit removed from my PhD, and I think that was really helpful. One, because it kind of let me broaden my tool set. Previously, I'd been focused on, certain algorithms for my PhD, and this internship really gave me the opportunity to explore a whole different other side of algorithms, whole other types of data. And the thinking process was the same, of course, because you start with the data, work out the algorithms, do all of your evaluations, but then he'd let me apply them in a completely new context with completely new algorithms, completely new ways of thinking about what is successful versus not successful. So that was a really good experience for me there. I also learned a lot about the differences between academia and industry. I had to submit a draft report at one point, and I kind of approached that report with the mindset of I'm going to write this like a paper, which was just, at this point, just kind of built into you, I think, if you've been publishing during the course of your PhD or your master's research. And I got some really nice feedback around, yes, this is perfect, this is great, this is concise, but actually we're looking for more detail. This is what we'd be looking for in an industry report. So little minor changes like that, where I just had to readjust my thinking. I think that was a really sort of interesting experience, trying to learn more about those differences and what is actually actively looked for in industry research versus academic research. And the team that I was working with was super supportive. I mentioned during the mid-internship presentation that, one of the reasons I'd picked up an internship was to learn more about how it worked and why someone might choose academia versus industry. And after the presentation, they actually said, if we've got time, maybe we can just sit down and talk about it together, because all of the people I was working with, they had also come from academia. So they were very willing and open to talk to me about, why they'd chosen their career paths, how did that work out for them, what are the organizations, the different organizations they worked with, how did that, how did they all work, that sort of thing. So I think for me, a big plus was just this organization I was working with was really supportive and helpful and willing to give me so much information about, that helped me figure out what I wanted to do, as well as giving me a project that I found really super interesting to work on. So overall, it was just a really great experience for me. And I think if there's really any sort of main tips I can give you guys on internships, the first one would be, I guess, start looking early because it does take quite a while. I started looking for internships in about January of last year, and I didn't find one until August, and then I started in September. So don't be discouraged if it does take time, and start early, and get your supervisors on board as well, because my principal supervisor was my academic mentor, and my associate supervisor as well was she had experience supervising another student for an internship, and she was able to give me some really good tips on how do I start looking and what I might need to do. So that was really helpful, having my supervisory team on board. And I guess the third thing I could say is just kind of have a clear idea of what you want to get out of it. I think that was really what helped me the most in the end, when I was trying to sort through all of these options I had, because a couple of people mentioned in the chat, you really want to work with not-for-profits or government organizations. And that was kind of where I was leaning towards as well when I started looking. But I found that the company, the multinational company, also gave me the experience I needed and the perspective I needed, even if I wasn't working directly with those government or not-profit organizations, because this company worked with them as well, and they could kind of give me the perspective I needed. So I guess if I had to sum up, those would be my 3 big tips. I can't see any other questions on the chat, so I might kind of close up here for now, but I'll be here till the end. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them then.